Hello, good evening. Welcome to Connect Africa. So, for today, we're going to dive to the subject directly. But before that, as you know, the world is changing, and Africa has a choice, of course, to follow, to adapt, or lead. Now, let's explore how Trump 2.0 fits into this story. Well, again, welcome to Connect Africa channel. Today, we are diving into the state of global geopolitics under, as I said, Trump 2.0 and what it means for Africa. Our guest tonight is not really a guest, our own Kwame Gonza, who is a Pan Africanist and an expert also on international affairs. He is here to help us to unpack these changes and opportunities, of course, relating it with Africa. Now, our first question will be, but before that, welcome, Kwame. Let me just give you a minute to say hello.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much, Mahlet, and greetings to our viewers who are supporting Connect Africa, our subscribers, the new subscribers and the old subscribers. Greetings to you, and thank you very much for supporting Connect Africa. And Mahlet yourself, thank you for keeping the platform alive and serving our people. It is not very easy.
Yeah.
Many people just take the easy road of participating, of course, in our own destruction, because that is an easy road that you can easily be bought out. I was speaking to a colleague of mine a few days ago, and we were talking about African journalism, how the West has taken over
Mhm.
Africa's civil society, what we call civil society, which is supposed to be representative of African civil society. The West came and took it over. And people like David Hundein, who's a Nigerian journalist, has been speaking loudly about this. The fact that the West and its NGOs come into Africa and they buy out our journalists. So it's not only in Nigeria and Ghana, but even in East Africa, he has pointed out these things. And we saw the shutting down of African Stream, which was mostly, pushed by the Biden administration. President Biden and his Secretary of State. I've forgotten his name. This small man.
Anthony Blinken.
Yeah, Anthony Blinken. So they led the shutting down of African Stream. So their purpose is to silence African voices so that there is no African narrative. And of course, all this stems from racism, extreme racism. So, with that, I want to appreciate you for holding the fort and continuing to serve our people, and not to be easily, bought, because many have been bought and they have turned against Africa. They peddle the Western narrative, the negative narrative about our continent. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Well, I mean, we are trying our best. As you said, it's not easy. So let's just leave it at that. So the first question will be to tonight's topic. Let's first start with Trump has been in office now for some time, looking at Africa. How would you describe the change in our relationship with US so far? Have we seen more opportunities, challenging, or would you say a bit of both?
Yeah, I think uh, there is mostly opportunities. I can't say that the coming of Trump brought misfortune. Apart from those who really have not been following the African continent and its relationship, of course, with the West. For the last 400 years, 400 to 600 years, we have mainly not benefited from this relationship with the West, with the general West, whether you're talking about Europe, and later on for the last maybe 60 to 70 years, when the United States, of course, came and took over from Europe, in this exploitation and manipulation of the African continent. So what we have been experiencing here is that you have two groups in the United States. You have the Democrats who claim that they are so liberal, and of course, who Malcolm X spoke about and said that they are just hypocrites. And then you have the Republicans on the other side who call themselves conservatives. Of course, for them, they believe in outright, exploitation, and they tell you what they're coming to do, whether it is war. And of course, that is the group to which people like George Bush and Dick Cheney, these are the groups. These kind of people, they outright tell you that we are coming to take your resources. We are about resources. Of course, once in a while they can lie. Like, for example, if you talk about what happened in Iraq, but they tell you outright what they're coming to do. So with Trump, you can't say that there's a difference, of course, between these two groups, because they achieve, what they are seeking to achieve is the same. So the difference is that the Democrats, the Democratic Party in the United States, uses hypocrisy. All right, they tell you that they are doing good, yet they are destroying you. It's like somebody who's putting a knife in your back because you are not looking there. All right, but if you try to look there before they put the knife in your back, they smile at you and they tell you that, oh, everything is fine, I'm just your bodyguard. This knife which I'm holding in my hand, is because I'm your bodyguard. Not knowing that the person was trying to pierce you put a knife in your back. So with Trump, he tells you exactly what he's going to do, and this is it. Okay, these institutions, like you said, people who are making a lot of noise in the African continent, of course, those are the ones who have been benefiting from these institutions. Especially, there's a couple of African elites who have been employed by these organizations, but on the whole, these institutions, like you said, an extension of the Central Intelligence Agency, which is the CIA of the United States, is an arm of the CIA. And what it seeks to achieve in these our countries is to do the damage, softly, to achieve the same objectives. And what Trump is saying is that these organizations are, are draining the United States. The dividends, the profit is no more forthcoming, and the Democrats are saying the profits will continue to come. We just need to continue to use these organizations so that we can achieve the same neocolonial objectives. And Trump is saying, if we are talking about neocolonialism, why don't we just go outright without even spending this money that we are spending? Let's just go and take whatever we have to take. And of course, you saw these are the deals that he's saying we should use force. So these are the the force. This is the force that he's using. So this mainly actually presents an opportunity for Africa, and that has to do with self-reliance. If you're talking about starting to build the things for ourselves, because we are not in 1960, all right? Because you can't say that we don't have capital. That is number one. Because when we entered independence, you could say that, okay, we needed the United States very much because they had the money. Okay, United States, by that time, 1945, it was the richest country in the world. All right, after 1945, it was very powerful, extremely powerful, and almost the rest of the countries were impoverished. Most of the countries had just emerged out of, colonialism, and then Europe was just emerging out of World War II. You see, so the US was almost the last man standing during that period. So we needed them. But today, you can't say that the world we are living in today, and this is which I find, this is something which I find really defeating on the side of the current leadership on the African continent,
Yeah.
because we are not
Now,
really in a
yeah,
new system.
Kwame, let's stay there. I'm going to help you really to dive into it more. So I am even, I'm going to ask you a follow-up one on that. You really have unfolded really the difference between Biden versus Trump, because most of the people, they think that, oh, Trump is better because he says America first, and that would allow us to say Africa first, or any member country first. It could be Ethiopia, South Africa, I don't know. But now, could you give us some examples? It could be from trade, investments, or diplomacy, because you yourself, you said that his pragmatic approach, just outrightly said, okay, let's just go and rob it, approach has been misunderstood by Africans. Some say it is good, some think that is better than Biden. So, first of all, what kind of opportunity it presents him, his approach? Could you give us some examples like investments or diplomacy? And are there African countries also who, following this, who have gained more influence or who have lost their influence?
So the opportunity, I think, is in capitalizing on our resources and not capitulating. Like, for example, you look at the tariffs which he's using, all right? The tariffs and what he's calling the deal making, like some of the things which he claims, of course, that he has done, which he has not done. For example, he said that he stopped the war in the Democratic Republic of Congo, all right? He said the war has been there for more than 40 years, that he came on the scene. Of course, he said the things at the United Nations recently. I think that's the 80th United Nations General Assembly. He mentioned the things that he came and stopped that war. He did not stop the war, because even up to now, the M23 are mobilizing and the place has not stabilized. So it's not, stopping this war is not as easy as that, as just saying I stopped the war. So I believe that these tactics that Trump is using, we can push back. All right. You see that the tariffs, some countries have pushed back on these tariffs. You look at China, for example. When they put tariffs, China too put tariffs. All right. And now the United States started capitulating. And now, also, what China did is that they used this opportunity actually to build, self-reliance, whether you're talking about the chips, all the other technologies, because remember, it was Trump 1.0, which, who brought, or Trump 1.0, which brought these so-called restrictions, technological restrictions on China. Okay. So China, instead of looking at this as a disadvantage, you remember they blocked Huawei, in 2021. Huawei, at some point, even after being blocked from having access to American technology, at some point in 2021, Huawei, as a company, even surpassed Samsung and briefly became the biggest telephone manufacturer. And it is the biggest currently, of course, telecommunications manufacturer. Now, in 2021, it surpassed Samsung briefly and became the biggest mobile phone manufacturer. Okay. But these tariffs, of course, had a little bit of setback. They brought some form of setback for Huawei and China. But China used this opportunity when the Biden, administration came. Of course, Biden did not remove those restrictions when he came, but China used that opportunity. All right, China used the opportunity to double down on, use the opportunity to double down on its self-reliance. You see, to the point that when Trump 2.0 came, they are even seeking to remove the tariffs and to remove the restrictions on technology. But China now has already attained almost full self-reliance. in technology, which they were restricting, and now they came back begging. An example is that they put restrictions on companies like Nvidia from supplying, certain, technology to China, semiconductors, okay, to China for its artificial intelligence. China used all these opportunities to innovate, to use what it has. Now, this is the opportunity that it presents to Africa as ourselves. We could use our resources because our resources are desired by everyone. These are our resources which they are powering major industries, whether it's in Asia, talk of Japan, China itself, South Korea, all these countries. And then you can talk of the United States itself and all these European countries. All right. They are depending on our resources. So we have an opportunity, but this cannot be done. This cannot be done if we are divided, we are going in fragmented way. Because even at its weakest point, the United States, the most powerful single state in Africa, cannot come up against the United States. Even at its weakest point, you see, at its weakest point, the most powerful country in Africa cannot come up against the United States at its weakest point. So what this tells us is, even at its most dysfunctional state, the United States, as you see it, the most powerful and functional, whatever it is, African country, one country cannot come up and compete against the United States. So what this tells you is that we have to work together. Whether we want it or not, we have to work together. And all these weaknesses, we cannot overcome them. The weaknesses of the United States or of Europe, we cannot overcome them or win against them or come against them if we are divided. And an example, of course, is the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, up to all the way 1990 when South Africa gained its independence. So you find that Europe emerged out of 1945, World War II, very weak, extremely weak, to the point that it has to take aid from the US through the Marshall Plan, right? But in singularly or as single states on the African continent, we could not even come up against Europe until we started collaborating. The people who were fighting for independence on the continent, until they started collaborating. If South Africa did not collaborate all the way with the East and the West, all the African countries, Algeria, they started collaborating closely. That's how we were able to defeat. So it shows you that even at its weakest point, imperialism, we could not defeat it individually, singularly as a small state. You can't. So it's the same situation that we are seeing today. We are seeing that Europe is in big trouble. There's a war. They are fighting. You are seeing the chaos in France. You are seeing the chaos, the economic decline in Germany. Economies are shrinking. They are in big trouble. In the US, the economy is shrinking. Okay, they are in big trouble. Debt. They have huge amounts of debt. So they are declining. But even in that decline, in that weakness, if we don't do the right thing, I'm here in Togo, I'm here in Burkina Faso, I'm here in Zimbabwe, and people continue to close themselves inside those small countries. I mean, these guys will research themselves and find us where we are and continue to eat us and feed on us. So the opportunity is huge that we have an opportunity.
Kwame, you are a bit breaking your sound.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I do now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So what I'm saying is that even at their weakest point, even at its weakest point, imperialism, we cannot defeat it if we are going to continue, being fragmented. All right. If we are going to continue to shut our doors and say, I'm here, I'm in Kenya, I'm here, I'm in Rwanda, oh, I'm in Rwanda. Because this is the weakness which was exploited even, in 1985, 1984, 1985, when they came to colonize. This is what they exploited. So, and then we were able to somehow overcome that weakness in 1957 when Ghana got its independence, and then we started collaborating and we were able to defeat these guys. So, but what we are seeing the trend now going back as if we are in antiquity, as if we are in before colonialism, that people now are concentrating in the small states. It's like they don't really appreciate what is going on globally, even though the signs are clear. The signs are really clear that this is what is happening globally, and we need to start playing in a different way. So I think that is an opportunity, just like China is taking advantage of it, to lead industrially in all areas. It is an opportunity for us also, because technology now is available almost everywhere. It's not
So
that
let me just come here, if you allow me, because we have really, I have questions for those. But just to conclude, how Africa is responding to these changes that's coming from Trump's administration, because I was going to ask how the African leaders are responding to this change. Is it cautiously, or do they see openings to benefit for themselves? But I think
yeah. So
you can sum it up.
I really don't see any like radical response apart from Sahel states. They're the ones who are seeing the opportunity. I mean, you can only talk of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. These guys are the ones who have seen the opportunity, the chance that is there, and they are saying that we are going to take advantage of it. That's why you are seeing they launched the Sahel states, union, talking about federation. They're talking about a new bank. So these are the guys who have seen. They're talking about withdrawing from the International Criminal Court. Why? Because the United States itself is not a signatory to the International Criminal Court. All right? Israel is not a signatory to the International Criminal Court statute. So these guys, they say this is nonsense. We can't stay in this kind of chaos. So they are launching their own bank. They are collaborating in health. They are taking back the resources, because this is the time. All right? Because situations like what is happening in the West and with Trump, whereby Trump is even fighting with Canada and fighting with Europe and putting tariffs on everyone, is an opening. It's a great opportunity. It means that all their resources, which they were going to use in oppressing you, those resources are not going to be focused on you hugely. So it's an opportunity for you to rebel. I think it is Ibrahim Traore who said that a slave who doesn't rebel is not worthy of pity. All right? He's not worthy of pity. So this is the situation now that we are facing on the African continent, that majority of the heads of state, they think that it's business as usual. They think that they are so accustomed. It's like how you say that, okay, an elephant was raised, tied, when it was young, it was tied on a small stick. Now, it used to try to leave that small stick or that small tree, and it could not come off. So it got used to that place to the point that even when it grew and it grew very big, it stopped even fighting to leave that small tree, okay, where it is tied. Yet, when it is grown, it is so strong that it can easily pull that tree and come off. Okay, so this is the situation that we are facing, even with the African heads of state, that many of them, they are so accustomed to being controlled and being told what to do, that even in such a time as this, when you can rebel and go ahead and do your own things, some of them, they are still waiting to be told what to do. And so that's why you see people like Ramaphosa going to the US to beg Trump, instead of coming to the African continent and mobilizing. You see, instead of intensifying the mobilizing of the other, African states, African heads of state, Ramaphosa goes to the US to beg the United States. It's a country which is already declining. So this is lack of self-awareness, lack of awareness of the environment you are in, even the world you are living in. because this should have been an opportunity, a great opportunity for us to intensify, our struggle for fighting, to fight for unity, our struggle for unification of the African continent, so that we can build self-reliance and then start building our own infrastructure, start building the African economy independent, because now we don't have a lot of pressure, because their resources now are not so much focused on us, they are focused on themselves, and probably focused on China, focused on Ukraine, focused in the Middle East. So this is a chance. It's a great, great chance for us. But you ask, are African heads of state seeing this? Majority are not seeing it, apart from the Sahelian states. So these people, they
Instead of
think that it's business
first
as
time
usual.
to look inward, but still they are begging, and
Yes, so they think it's business as usual, or let's wait for the World Bank to come and help us. Let's wait for the IMF to come and help and bail us out. You see?
and it's
Yet you don't
working.
need these institutions. You don't need these institutions. You don't need the IMF to survive. At this point, when Africa's economy has grown all the way from the 1950s, when it was about 500 billion, to the point today when it is 3 trillion, we are going to 4 trillion. Our economy is the same size as that of India. So they think it's business as usual. They think we are living in the 60s, yet we are not living in the 60s. Technology is available in the East, is available in China. You have the capital, you just have to mobilize it and use your own stuff and move forward and build your own infrastructure and unlock productivity in the African continent. So the only group that is seeing it is the Sahelian states at this point.
And those are, I don't know, ironically or not ironically, or obviously, they are the ones who are cutting their ties with the West, like the US and France. I mean, not diplomatic tie, but, this security agreement and other things. So they're taking measures. And that shows you that's the best way to go forward. Now, you spoke of China and others, so going to my next question. Now, if we look beyond the United States, Africa is not alone on the global stage. You have Russia, Europe, as you said, China, and other players. So now that brings me to ask you the Africa's role in a shifting global landscape. Okay, so with all these global players or tensions, also, how can African countries best protect their interest and also at the same time strengthen their voice in world affairs, which you have touched, lack of unified government or unity, at least in voice. Like, are there any specific measure in terms of like strategic diplomacy, security, or trade that you would recommend?
Yeah, so when you look at what David Hundein has spoken about, David Hundein, the journalist, the African journalist from Nigeria, I think these days he's staying in Kenya or something, or Ghana. I don't know which place he's staying. He's been running all over because he's being persecuted by the Nigerian state after he exposed Tinubu as a CIA asset, FBI CIA asset, which was planted. He's a president who was planted in Nigeria, but he's basically a CIA asset. He was not, elected by the Nigerian people. So this is the reason why Hundein is being, persecuted to the point that he's not these days staying in Nigeria. Now, what he said is that the shutting down of USAID, for example, is a very good thing for Africa, because USAID is an institution that has been used for money laundering, to finance terrorism, and not only in Nigeria and the Sahel, but even many other parts of the world, many other parts of the African continent, and then other parts of the world. So what this means, the shutting down, what the shutting down of organizations like this means is that it for Africa, it gives us an opportunity as Africans to build institutions, our own institutions. Because remember, this institution is the one which has been dominating what the so-called African civil society space, NGOs, Western NGOs.
Yeah.
So now, at this particular moment, now you have an opportunity to build your own institutions as Africans. When this pressure, when these so-called NGOs are not putting so much pressure in your society, they are not encroaching, on your society. That is number one. You have an opportunity as a continent to build your own institutions. All right. Now, when we go to institutions like the United Nations, we have been crying at the United Nations all the way from Nkrumah. People initiated the fact that started calling that Africa should have a seat at the United Nations Security Council so that we can also have veto powers. And this has been spoken about for more than 60 years by the subsequent heads of state, the President Mugabe's, many African heads of state. Today, the Mahamas of Ghana, who gave a very powerful speech at the United Nations, and many others have been speaking about this. Whether you're talking about the president of I think Malawi and Namibia, all of them, they are speaking about the fact that Africa should be at the seat where decisions are made. But the fact is that at the United Nations, the seat is not given. All right, the seat is not merely given as a gift. You have to work for it, and you work for it by, first of all, mobilizing your people at home and building your society to the point that it is powerful, it is admirable. All right. Many people say that the countries which are on the is only a few countries on the Security Council at the United Nations, only a few countries which do not have nuclear weapons. I think it is France. France is, I don't think France has nuclear weapons and is on the Security Council. But most of the countries which are on the Security Council have nuclear weapons. So you have to reach a certain level where you have respect from the world. Now, if you are still begging, there's no way you can go to the United States. You are begging the IMF and International Monetary Fund to bail you out. You cannot go to the United Nations and start asking that they should give you a seat at the United Nations Security Council, where the big boys sit. You see, when they are making decisions about the world. And of course, this does not mean that we should not be there. But what I'm saying is that the heads of state have to come out of this mentality that we are saying that we are not in the 60s. We have to step up. We have to sit up and start working, and working at home to mobilize our people to rebuild the continent. And that means that we have to start prioritizing. We have to start with the priorities. How did the United States build it itself? How did the EU build it itself? How did China build it itself? So we have to start from the basics. We can't just go and start climbing from the top and say we are going to demand for seats at the permanent seats, or on the Security Council at the United Nations, before we have even built the African economy. So what are we going to use the veto powers for when we are not even organized at home?
Yeah.
So I think that the first things that we have to be looking at, at home in Africa, is to improve the productivity of our people by giving the people the tools to productivity. The tools to productivity on the African continent have to be given to the people so that we can raise the standards of living of our people first.
What do you mean by that? The tools? Can you?
So what this means is that when we look at the economy of the world, even at the Security Council, it is the countries which have bigger economies, economically viable. We can say economically viable. It's the rich countries. All right? They are the ones who are sitting on the Security Council. So until you have reached that level, and they have given their citizens the tools to productivity. The tools to productivity is laying the foundation. For example, the building of a railway platform. We have to build a railway platform on the African continent. We have to build an integrated railway platform. What this means is that you open up the market, enhance entrepreneurship, increase the productivity of energy. All right, we have to produce more energy, because there is a couple of things that we are supposed to give people, about 4 things, when we are talking about improving productivity or giving our people the tools to productivity. One, we give them access to the market, the African market, all the African market of 1.4 billion people. We have to give it to our people, our entrepreneurs, so that we can have big companies built on the African continent. That is how we can compete with the rest of the world. Now we have to open that market, and that market, you can only open it if you build a continental railway platform, which helps you to link the continent, so that people, entrepreneurs, okay, and business people, farmers, all these can move their goods across the continent, and this will reduce the importation. Many of the goods which are imported, which are unnecessary, is because we don't have a means of moving them from one part of the continent to the other part of the continent. Now, look at, for example, West Africa. Most of the coffee in West Africa is imported from Europe, and we have huge amounts of coffee in East Africa. Why? There's no transportation. There's no transportation means. Okay, so cocoa products like chocolate, for example, most of it that is consumed in East Africa is imported from Europe. Yet we have cocoa products in West Africa. So look at the billions and billions that we are wasting. Why? It's because of uncoordinated systems. No, entrepreneurs don't have access to their own market. They don't have access to their own market. So that's number one. We have to open up the continent by opening a railway platform, by building a railway platform. Number two, communication. Many people have said this. Calling from Ghana to Kenya is more expensive than calling from Ghana to the United States. It's more expensive. Calling from Ghana to India is cheaper than calling from Ghana, okay, to Ethiopia. So why? Is because we don't have an integrated communication platform on the African continent. So these are the things that we need to do. Now, that's number two, communication. We have to lay a fiber optic cable across the African continent. Number three, we have to enhance the energy production on the African continent. Without electricity, you can't talk of industrialization. You cannot talk of entrepreneurship. You cannot talk of productivity. How are you going to talk of productivity if there's no energy? Now, Africa is one of the lowest, producers of electricity. There is not a single country on the African continent which does not have energy problems, electricity problems. Not a single one. So how are we going to then compete with the rest of the world and then go to the United Nations and demand for a seat at the United Nations General Assembly when even our people are sleeping in the dark? They cannot even produce their. So what is the use of the seat at the United Nations Security Council when we cannot produce energy for our people to produce? So these are the realities. And then, of course, access to capital, which we said that, the aggregating of Africa's GDP, it can be used to give capital then to our entrepreneurs and farmers for them to produce. So this is how we double Africa's GDP within less than maybe 10 years. Okay, we can double what we have as $4 trillion. It can be doubled within less than 10 years. Many countries have done it. Since 2012 up to, since 2012 up to 2022, Uganda doubled its GDP from 25 to 50 billion. So it can be done. It can absolutely be done by doing the right thing, by investing in the right infrastructure, by prioritizing. So we are talking about building a railway platform on the African continent, laying a fiber optic cable which integrates the African continent so that we can have an integrated communication platform, and then increasing the productivity of our energy. We need to increase the production of energy so that we can have stable electricity, all over the African continent, and then we can talk about aggregating, our GDP, and then, capitalizing on this and giving capital to our people so that our people, can use our own finances instead of waiting on foreign investors, because for 60 years we have been waiting on foreign investors. We have not achieved anything from this waiting on foreign investors, and they have not done anything to help us as a continent, as foreign investors. And all we see is people like Dangote. These are local investors. These are domestic investors. They are the ones who are moving things on the continent. Foreign investors, where are they? They have exploited Nigeria for the last 60 years, and these are the ones we call foreign investors. Up to now, for 60 years, Nigeria has never had stable power, has never had a stable energy system until a domestic investor came through, like Dangote, is the one who has stabilized the energy industry in Nigeria. So these are the realities that I think that we need to work on. And this, of course, requires, the mobilization of the whole continent. And unfortunately, of course, what we are up against is the people, African heads of state, who have a mindset that things are the way they are, they can't change, and therefore it's business as usual. I think this mindset is what we are going to have to, combat and fight against, because things might not be allowed to continue, that we are operating as if we are in the 1960s, because we are into the 21st century. People are thinking as if we are still in the 19th century, whereby we are colonies. So this mentality, I think we have really to fight against it, so that we can take Africa to the next level.
Thank you so much, Kwame. I think you have beautifully explained and listed out for that what needs to be done. And there you go. You have recommended. I hope our leaders are taking a note. Really, because these are things that you need to sit down in the office one-to-one, those leaders, whether it's a president or a prime minister, and suggest to their policy advisors what to do. So just to remind, one is to open up the market, and also the communication and energy enhancing. Without these things, we cannot talk about development. Now, things still there, what Africa's role should be in this shifting global landscape. What do you say about the growing investment, like from China and Asia? Like, how should African leaders respond? Some suggest that Africans are simply replacing one foreign master with another one. You have clearly said that a homegrown thing is better, but what's your take on this?
Yeah, so for China, definitely China is looking for markets. You know that China is facing challenges, with the US blocking off, for example, its market, of course, which is costing the US itself, hugely, to the point that it has a lot of inflation, and the cost of a lot of things are going up even in the United States. And then it has challenges with the tariffs with Europe itself. So definitely China will look out for easy markets to get into, and that easy market, of course, is within its neighborhood in Southeast Asia, and then of course you can talk of Africa. And I'm seeing this because myself, I'm in business. I mean, in the dealing of electric cars, and the Chinese are coming, and they are coming aggressively, onto the African continent. So if you are not organized, if we as Africans are not organized, then this is definitely going to be the result for forever. China will come, and take advantage of this. Of course, the investments are not as before. China is not investing in Africa as before, as it did before, but it needs the market. It needs the market that it needs, to sell its products. Once those products are blocked somewhere else, China is going to look to want to sell those products into the African continent, and they are doing it. Like, for example, electric vehicles are coming in a major way, onto the African continent from China. They are flooding into the continent. So until we realize that we have to be organized, I mean, we are going to continue to remain prey. Even the people we can negotiate with, like China, is easily a country that we can negotiate with as Africans, because it's open to this kind of relationship. China is open to relationships where you present your needs and then you argue it out, you negotiate it out. Unlike the West, which wants to come and dictate to you and colonize you and bomb you and then destroy everything which you have and then take whatever they want. China is open to these kind of discussions, is open to, to negotiations if you really know what you want. And we have seen this with people like President Tshisekedi. When he came to power, he renegotiated some of the contracts, some of the mineral contracts with China, and China agreed. All right. So we have to be organized, because China is not also a Father Christmas that is going to come always to give things for free. It's not going to come and give things for free. We have to give also something. We have to give something, in return. And if we don't think that we should aggregate our power so that we can negotiate with a lot of leverage against a more powerful, side, then we are going to remain prey, to a powerful side we cannot compete against. So with China, you are coming up against an economy of $18 trillion, and a country like Rwanda, how many billion dollars is it? It's not even up to 100 billion. It's not up to even 30 billion economy. So how are you going to negotiate with China, a $18 trillion economy with massive industrial capacity, which is 30% of global industrial capacity? Look at this level of productivity. So how are you going to compete and negotiate with this country? So I think that this mist, this cloud that is on the minds of African heads of state has to be removed. They have to remove it from themselves, or somebody has to remove that cloud from them by force. That mentality of thinking that the current unviable African states can continue operating and competing with the rest of the world. It's not going to be possible. We will always be taken advantage of if we don't put our acts together, even by very good people like China, very, very good people who would be on the other side and are willing to negotiate. Because you don't want to put your house in order, these guys are going to always come and take advantage of you. So that's what I see even in this era. And that stems from, again, what we say, the lack of understanding or lack of failure to realize the times we are living in, that the times have changed. We are not in 1945, we are not in 1960. We are in the 21st century. So the thinking is supposed to be different. The thinking is supposed to be that we are equally competing on the global stage. We should not continue to be beggars. We are equally competing with the rest of the world. We have the same intelligence with these people. So why do we have to continue to think that we should continue to beg, put our hands and be begging and say, give us this, give us and that, as if we don't have the same intelligence and we don't have the same energy, and we have these resources which they don't have, and we have built up enough bigger economies compared to the 1960s. So I think something has to change, and if that something doesn't change, it has to be forced. Somebody has to force the change through. If the people who are in power in the African continent don't want to change, somebody has to force that change through.
I was wondering, while you are, talking about this in detail, are there any lessons that we can draw from past global shifts Africa can apply now?
So there is a lot of lessons. A lot of lessons are there.
Just to mention one or two.
Yes, and one of those, of course, we have already spoken about. Without unity, there's nothing. Even the weakest of imperialists, you cannot defeat him if you are not united in Africa as we are currently. We cannot do it. We cannot achieve anything without being unified, without working together and closely on the most critical parts of our society. And what is the demand actually of our time? What is really the demand of our time? What is the challenge of our time? The challenge of our time is economic. But that economic challenge and is the challenge of productivity. Because like we said, Africa's productivity is just less than 3% of the globe. Even though we contribute 18% of the global population, our productivity should be at around 18%. But our productivity is just 3%, less than 3% of. So this is the challenge. The challenge of our time is the challenge of productivity. And this has to be attended to by at the political level, because that is where the control for all the resources on the African continent are. So these are the lessons. We have to study from history and look and say, what was the challenge in the 18th century? The challenge in the 18th century was the issue of fighting against slavery. African bodies were being mortgaged and then pulled from the African continent, extracted from the African continent. What was the challenge of the 20th century? The 20th century was the challenge of independence. All right. So now, if we gain this independence, then what is the challenge of the 21st century? Is the challenge of productivity. That's the challenge that we have. And this challenge can only be attended to by the political independence we achieved. We have to stop thinking that we are still in the 19th century or the 20th century, whereby we have to continue to beg. So this is where we say that if the current generation of leaders on the African continent doesn't want to change their mind, somebody has to force them to change. The change has to be forced through. The mindset change has to be forced through by someone. Someone has to come through and force. And that can only be done by the next generation, the so-called youth. The new generation has to come up and force and change that. We cannot continue to operate this way, how they are operating, that we have to move faster.
Is there any country or leader that's forced and successful story that we can learn when you say we have to force them?
Of course, we have AES. You are seeing what is happening with Burkina Faso. This is the kind of force that we are talking about. I mean, it could come in different ways of forcing through this change, but the change has to be forced through. Because before Traore came, you could not see those changes that you are seeing in Burkina Faso. Self-reliance, the military, the people are being mobilized to build the roads. People have been mobilized to protect their country. They are buying their own military weapons, not relying on France. You see, you are seeing what happened in Senegal, with the Sonko. So this is the change that we are talking about. It has to be forced through. Because the older generation is like they are so stuck. They are stuck. They just frozen in time that they really don't appreciate the period in which we are living in. You see, even though people every day they are on radio stations, they are on TV stations, great leaders like Xi Jinping are talking about these things and saying the changes we are seeing have never happened in 100 years. Our leaders our heads of state in Africa, they are frozen in time. They think that things are just supposed to continue in the way they were in 1940s. We should continue everything the way it is. Even when we are in 2025, these guys are living like they are living in 20, they are living in 1960, whereby we are supposed to be beggars. So huge lessons, from history, which we can learn, from a lot of things we can learn from history.
Wow, thank you so much, Kwame, for that. Now, we have talked about relationships and strategy, but what about like the bigger picture, what Africa can do to really seize opportunities and avoid risks? To some extent, we talked about, seizing opportunity. Now, in that, I want to ask, like, given the current global changes, what opportunities should African countries be ready to take, and what risks should they be careful about? Like, for example, are there sectors like the tech sector, energy, or trade that Africa could really benefit? Yeah, in terms of risks, also, I want you to touch up on the Gulf states coming in now, the Middle East also. They're like taking their turn. Everybody's taking a turn in robbing Africa. But yeah, I give you the floor.
Yeah, so in I think it was in 2018 when President Xi Jinping, actually President of China, said that China was ready to, during China Africa Summit, I think it was held in Beijing. He said that China was ready to help Africa, with technology transfer. China has reached a level where it has enough technology to help Africa lift itself technologically. But of course, that opportunity was not, taken over. It was not embraced. That opportunity was not embraced. So there is huge opportunity in all sectors. Whether you're talking about technology sector, like I said, we have enough technical know-how. Our African continent is about more than 75% literacy rate. We have about more than 75 literacy rate, right, on the African continent. So there's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity in manufacturing of vehicles, lithium, because vehicles now, they have even become much more easier to manufacture compared to internal combustion engines. That is why you see that China has leapfrogged. So this is a sector in which Africa can capitalize on this. For example, in Uganda, you have a company which is called Kira Motors, which is called Kira Motors, which is manufacturing, buses, all right, electric buses. This could be an opportunity for the other African countries to buy their buses from Uganda instead of going to China, instead of going to Europe, instead of continuing to go to Europe to buy buses. Support the manufacturing of these buses so that Africans can get, employment, and then the African economy can grow instead of, throwing out money and letting it go outside. You can talk of energy. Nigeria could become the petroleum hub of the African continent with all the refineries which it has. All right, so you have the Dangote oil refinery, which can even meet the needs of all of Nigeria, but Nigeria still has other 4 refineries which can easily be recapitalized and rehabilitated to produce petroleum products, refined petroleum products for the whole African continent, for the whole African continent. So you can see that there's opportunities everywhere in technology, in agriculture itself. Dangote has just, inaugurated the construction of a fertilizer plant, 2.5 billion fertilizer plant in Ethiopia. So huge opportunities in agriculture. You see, so what Dangote is demonstrating is that we have to work together. We have to integrate the continent. This is what Dangote is basically demonstrating. And up to now, the African heads of state, they cannot see. They can't see. You see? So this guy is demonstrating that the timing is right. These guys are distracted with a lot of infighting. They are fighting against each other. It's similar to what happened in 1945, 1950, 1960. It's because the Europeans were fighting against each other. They were distracted in wars against each other. That is how we got a chance to fight for independence. And it is similar to what happened in 17, I think it was 1771, in Haiti, right? France and Britain were fighting against each other, and they were distracted. And the slaves, started fighting. Africans started fighting, beating France in San Domingo, which is currently Haiti. So Dangote is demonstrating that there's an opportunity, you guys here. And these people, they are really no, like they are not really seeing that this is the opportunity. Instead of mobilizing all of Africa's richest, mobilizing all of Africa's private sector and saying, guys, get your act together. Let us build maybe a continental area platform. All right, put your resources together. This thing can be done even without going to beg anyone outside the continent. Without, just put together all the African businessmen, all right, call them to Addis Ababa when there's an African Union meeting in February or in March, whatever it is, African Union General Assembly or whatever it is. Call them, call even African decent people and say we are going to build the continental railway platform. We need just $150 billion. This is small money which these guys can raise easily. This is money which can be raised easily. So these are huge opportunities that we are talking about. Huge opportunities, they have never existed. And these things will be done when these guys are distracted, are fighting against Middle East. They are fighting against Russia, they are fighting against China. So they have spread themselves so wide that they don't have the resources to fight all these wars. To start and fight all these wars and finish them. Now they're fighting in Palestine and all this. So they don't really have these resources to fight all these wars. And this is an opportunity that all these resources which would have been used to oppress us are now distracted and taken somewhere else. So giving us a breathing space as Africans. So now this brings us to the Middle East. Of course, we see the Middle East. Also, they're trying to diversify their economies because of the transition that we are going through, that the usage of petroleum products is going down a little bit. It's not completely going to stop. It's not going to stop, of course, the use of petroleum products, but it's going to come down. The use of oil products is going to reduce because of electrification of transport, because automobiles are the biggest consumer of petroleum products. So once they are electrified, then this consumption of petroleum products is going to go down. So what this means is that the Middle Eastern countries now are looking for where to invest. They are looking for how to diversify their economies, and we have seen them in Democratic Republic of Congo, of course. We have seen them in other African countries. We have seen them in Tanzania. We have seen them, I think some of them in Malawi and all these countries. We have seen them in a couple of countries. So they are looking for where, to put their money and then start also continue to suck out, profit, whether it is investing in ports, to control your resources, your vital resources, of course. They're going to seek to control your vital resources like lithium, for example, because this is the new oil. Lithium is the new oil, which powers electric cars instead of oil. So these are some of the things that definitely we need to be careful of, because if we are not, remember that if they don't get it peacefully, these Middle Eastern countries also have a history of sponsoring terrorists. They will be sponsoring terrorist groups. They use the same Western tactics to create chaos in the African continent so that they can take the resources while you are dying and fighting against each other. So these are all the other risks I think that we can think of. We've seen Turkey intervene in on numerous cases, even mediating between Ethiopia, I think, and Somalia. And then we have seen Turkey get very involved in Somalia in many cases. I think even he wanted to have a port or something, country port in Somalia or something. So we have seen Turkey come even all the way, to West Africa. They are saying they want to build mosques. We have seen Turkey building stadiums in Uganda, right? It built a stadium in Western Uganda using actually Ugandan money. So you can
this railway in Tanzania and Uganda.
these industries which we could have capitalized on to increase our productivity, improve our productivity. We can use our own money, build these industries as indigenous African industries. Okay, like for example, railway industry, your aircraft industry. These are industries we can build so that they are indigenous African industries, so that we don't have to go and beg these people to come here and do anything for us. we don't have to produce engineers in our universities. At the same time, the engineers come out and they don't have work. When we are giving the work to Indians, we are giving the work to Turkeys, we are giving the work to Brazilians, we are giving the work to Europeans and Chinese, yet we are producing engineers. So I think great opportunities, are before us if we look carefully and take advantages of them, during these changing times.
I think if I would sum it up, thank you very much, first of all, for that. Really, I'm learning a lot, and so do also our viewers here online. A lot of in the chat sections, there's a lot of comments. Maybe if we have time, we'll get back to it. Now, what you talked so far, I think it tells us how we can prevent ourselves or Africa from economical shocks in this, in terms of avoiding risk. But what about the political shocks? How can we avoid risks on that?
I think the political shocks, we can avoid them, like especially the wars which Europeans are fighting against each other, like the US is fighting against Europe. I think we don't have to, to get involved. I mean, it's very risky for us. We need to concentrate on building our strength, on the African continent. Risks like that, we
But
don't.
do we is there anyone dares to step in their fight even? I mean,
you be manipulated to support one side or the other. You have
okay.
seen how the United States has been saying that if you don't side with us, then it's important to keep.
Okay.
Yes, so it's important to keep the interests of the African people and the African continent in focus. You see, the things, the threats, like, for example, which Trump has been throwing around and saying that anyone who wants to side with the BRICS, you put sanctions on him. Anyone who doesn't want to use the dollar. So these are political risks, right? So it's important to keep in focus the interests of the African people and not be threatened. Have unwavering commitment. And so far, we have seen that very few on the African continent, of course, has that unwavering commitment to the interests of the African people. They are easily, pushed by the wind. And when we opened here, we spoke about people like Ramaphosa, with people like Ruto, going up and down, running here and there, and not doing the things they're supposed to be doing, So these are the risks that you can think of, that you'll be manipulated. People will be manipulated, to take sides and take the wrong sides instead of sticking to their guns and protecting the interests of the African people.
Okay. Now that brings us to the last thing that I want to ask you. Do you see Africa, emerging stronger in the next 5 or 10 years?
I think I see it. I see us emerging stronger if only we do the right thing, and we have to increase pressure, of course, on the existing system. Because what we have to understand is that the current political system and political class is a remnant. If the neo-colonial structure is dying, the current political structure on the African continent is a remnant of that dying structure. So that political structure on the African continent then has to be helped to go. And in many cases, unfortunately, it doesn't go peacefully. It has to be forced out. And that is what we're seeing that happened happened in Mali, Niger, and Burkina. Those neo-colonial structures have to be forced out in order to build a new order, a new sort of African order, for it to be built. And in this case, it may need the help maybe of the Sahel states, to come in and help. But what we have is that it is necessary that we emerge strong as African countries. We have to, because we don't have any other option. But the current political structure and system and the groups that you see on the continent, they are remnants of that dying neo-colonial system that has to be pushed out. that neocolonial system that is withdrawing, like for example, the United States is withdrawing from the areas where it controlled. They're running away from, from Afghanistan, all right? The failure to commit, for example, to the Ukraine war, that they failed to commit to go in and fight because they fear Russia, and they are leaving it to, they are leaving it to Europe, that Europe should grapple with it, and Europe doesn't have the capacity to grapple with that kind of, complicated situation. So United States is withdrawing. The neo-colonial system is trying to withdraw and or to die out. Now, these are heads of state. They are part of that neo-colonial system that now we have now to intensify our struggle and organization in the African continent for us to push them out by force if they don't want to go, peacefully. So with that, Africa can emerge even in less than 5 years. You remember the words of, Aliko Dangote, Mr. Aliko Dangote, when he said that we can build Africa into heaven, I think in less than 10 years. It said less than 5 or 10 years. So that is actually what is capable of happening on the African continent, that it can be rebuilt in less than 5 to 10 years, and people will be very happy on the continent if only we push out the old system that is extractive. The system is extractive. I think I read one book which is called, I think it's called Poverty of Nations or Wealth of Nations or something like that, which has a thesis which says that the extractive systems subsequently die out because they don't add value to the population. They don't build institutions which are functional and empower citizens. So subsequently, they will die out. So the neocolonial system itself is actually an extractive system that extracts wealth from the vulnerable or the colonial countries or the former colonial countries, and then it takes those gains to the metropolis in France, in Paris, in London, in Brussels, in Washington. You see? So if the system is dying from the metropolis, as we are seeing the chaos in Paris and then Brussels, Germany, and then Washington, then these guys who are representatives of that system, they're supposed also to be pushed out because they're supposed to go with that system. So that is what we have now. But they can't go, of course, in many cases peacefully. That's why you are seeing, that's why you see that even the apartheid regime in South Africa held on. Remember that Ghana got its independence in 1957. The regime in South Africa, which was a remnant of a dying colonial system, hung on, lasted and hung on until 1993, when it had to be pushed out by force. It had to capitulate, but somebody had to push out, somebody had to fight very hard to push it out. So, and subsequently later on it was pushed out after a lot of work from 1960s, 70s, 80s. Almost people spent like more than 30 years fighting it because it was still hanging on to an already dead system. So that is what you are seeing, that even on the African continent, something like that is likely to happen, that the dying system or the dead system, the dead neo-colonial system, will have to be somehow pushed out, either peacefully or forcefully. And it has to go with that. And it may take, in some cases, it may take 10, 20, even 30 years, like how you saw the apartheid regime in South Africa lasted for, after the independence of Ghana, it lasted more than almost 30 years before it was completely pushed out.
Is there any country that you would say, if this and this and this countries in Africa can make it, it's easy for the rest to make
Yeah,
it?
so in the 1950s, you could say, so this is a question you cannot, is not an easy question to answer, because in the 1950s, 1940s, there's no way you could say that a country as small as Ghana could play a major role. Okay, you could say, okay, because that time Ethiopia, you could see that, okay, Ethiopia was somewhat independent, that it could have given much more help to the rest of the African countries for them to get independence, even though it inspired, of course, we cannot take that away from Ethiopia, that it inspired all these, movements due to the struggles, which it was going through with Italy and all these. But no one expected that Ghana would come, in such a way under Nkrumah, inspire and give a lot of help. And within a period of almost less than 5 years, about more than 30 countries were independent, and Ghana played a huge, huge role. So even today, it may be difficult. That help could come from inspiration of the Sahel states, the AES states. So it could come from sometimes somewhere where you don't expect. But you could say that if I think it's Mandela who said, Nelson Mandela, who said that if Nigeria, the day Nigeria gets it right, the whole of the African continent will get it right. So you could say that, but the interest, because the neocolonial interests are so much entrenched in some of these states, like South Africa, you could say that, okay, South Africa, if South Africa gets it, maybe, but due to it, the way South Africa is integrated into the neocolonial structure, it is very difficult. Even the people will be very difficult to mobilize to give resources to the other African countries so that they can completely liberate themselves, and then maybe we can march on to unity. Why? Because of the mindset of the people, that they already think that, if Africans come here, they are foreigners. They are they are the, fellow Africans come here, they are foreigners. So even if Malema took over, it could be difficult for him to mobilize South Africa to move in that direction, even though he's someone I believe that would be able to do it. So Nigeria, so this is not an easy question, this to answer, or even to sit down and conclude on and say such and such a country is the one which can make it. But I think the AES could be a very good center of gravity at the moment, as what we
Yeah.
are seeing is happening on the
Also, in the
continent.
same token, you can say also, who would have expected Niger, Mali, or even Burkina Faso to
No
be such
one,
an
yeah,
influence? Yeah.
absolutely no one would have expected.
Thank you so much, Kwame. If you allow us, there are some interesting comments and sometimes questions. Can we take them? Shall I go through? Yeah.
Pardon?
If you allow us, I want to go through some of the comments and questions. Is that okay?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, because most of them, they are excited that they catch you live after such a long time. So it's hard for us and for them also to let you go. Now,
Let's go through them quickly.
okay, so Nigeria and South Africa, key linchpins, but my best one is West Africa, and then East Africa will step forward first. That's okay. A comment. So I'm going from bottom to up. US failures. This is Anton Dalema. Hello, welcome every one of you, in each and every one of you. US failures are epic. They are far weaker than they project. It almost become comedy for experienced analysts. Yeah, from Anton, you have there's a question to you, Kwame. Please, Kwame, examine the Hyundai plant debacle in Georgia, in USA, just recently, and tell us what you think. So maybe for another
Yeah,
time.
so I think he's talking about where Trump deported, I think, more than 300 South Korean engineers. They were deported from the US. Of course, people have said that I think even the CEO of Ford Motors, Jim Farley, said that the United States is lacking in technical know-how. It lacks engineers. And so this is what they are doing, that some of the engineers would have helped the country. They are being deported. Yeah, so South Korea also threatened that it would not invest some of the investment they had committed to under, Trump's coercive tactics and tariffs, tariffs and tactics. So yeah, all these, they play into our, our hands as people who have been suffering under neo-colonialism. Because remember, South Korea, Japan, all these allies of the US is the one who gives them, security. And they have almost grown and continue to thrive on the back of the United States, under the tutelage of the United States, the stewardship of the United States, because it gives them security, it guarantees them security, and then access, of course, to the resources of others. So once they have a problem, once allies have a problem inside their camp, like I said, when Britain and France had a disagreement, in the 18th century, that's when we got a chance to fight and free ourselves from slavery. And then when European countries were fighting against each other, who were allies, who sat at the table in 1884, and then 1885 to divide the continent. Later on, they would start fighting against each other. So when they started fighting against each other, for us, it was an opportunity, to fight for independence. So these things are similar. When you see tariffs, maybe today they may not fight against each other with guns, but you are seeing that Canada is not happy with the US, now Japan, and then South Korea also is not happy with the US, because Hyundai is basically a South Korean, automobile company.
Is
And
it a
so,
strategy to contain this, contain that, contain this? I mean, I don't know.
no, of course, there are mistakes. It's not that these guys always do the right things. They make mistakes too. Yeah, they
They're
make
almost,
mistakes.
yeah.
So because Trump, he thinks that he's correcting, all right? He thinks that he's correcting what has been, affecting the United States, because he said the countries, these are the words he used. He said that countries have been taking advantage of the United States. So for him, in those countries which have been taking advantage of the United States, he doesn't distinguish those ones who are so-called allies of the US and those ones who are not allies. That's why you are seeing that he's been negotiating deals with the European Union, negotiate deals, that he has struck deal with the United Kingdom, deal with South Korea, deal with Japan, deal with whoever it is. So for him, he doesn't distinguish between that, because he says that countries have been taking advantage of the US. So it's of course mistakes, and of course these are advantages for us.
So Anton says on that point, he's the one who asked you to investigate that Hyundai debacle thing. Now, he says, my point was that is or was a decent foreign worker deal. Koreans build machine or short-term contract, and US workers operate there after. Fair deal that Africans should explore. Did you hear?
Yeah. So I understand his point. I understand
Okay.
his point. Understand his point.
All right. I think we should call it. I will just comment two things. Point out one is original P. Plabantu, who said it's maybe words to note. He or she says, I doubt South Africa could lead the continent. The continent they can't deal with. Oranje Klein Fontaine, Cape Independence. South Africa is fast heading to Israel Palestine kind of conflict in their own way. That's what he said. Well, you never know, yeah, because or that Orania, whatever it's called, has declared as a state by itself. They are operating as a country. And then Osie said, what do you think of Namibia, and I think Malawi or Botswana. Are they really heading to the AES side? Is it something that African people should look up to?
Yeah, so the ideological grounding of the people in that region, I'm very skeptical of it. I'm really very skeptical of their capability to move in this this direction. Yeah, to be honest, I'm really skeptical of the east of the eastern part of the continent and the southern part of the continent.
Wow.
Yeah, it's possible, but I'm very yeah, it's possible. Like if you have movements like that of Julius Malema, I think that's a very very strong. If you have a movement like that coming, sweeping, and bringing a lot of new consciousness, but uh, those countries in the east, I think, and the south, I'm very skeptical of them. I'm skeptical of their ability, to move radically in the direction of African unification.
Thank you so much, Kwame, for your time. So we plan from now on, Kwame will be here with us every Wednesday. If you have any topic, burning issues that you want Kwame to look at, you can comment or suggest, just like what Anton did. And yeah, we will get back to you. Thank you all for being here, and then continue, share the video with others. Subscribe to the channel, subscribe to also Reimagined Africa, that's Kwame's YouTube channel. We try to be, more and more active, let's say that. As we said, it's not easy, but we try our best. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, have a good evening. Thank you, Kwame.
Thank you, Mahlet.
Bye.
And good night, everyone.